All right, good morning and welcome back. Today we are going to practice if we are given a function, writing out what that function is. Okay, so our two choices, we have either our sine or our cosine. Okay, and we need to decide between those. Now, at this point, when you look at these, you might not be able to decide right away, is it a sine or a cosine? And technically, here's the thing. This could be written as a sine or a cosine wave as we move it, as we shift it. However, remember, we are not spending that much time with phase shifts just because of this year. We're losing a little time just because of COVID. So we did talk about phase shifts for today. We're not going to worry about phase shifts. So we are going to have to use these formulas from the last page. Y equals a sine of bx plus c, or y equals a cosine of bx plus c. So because of that, with no phase shifts, we need to ask ourselves the question. So sine or cosine, and the difference between those two, which it's up to you if you write this up here or not. But if we have a sine curve, you probably remember that a sine curve at the y-axis, or at 0 for the x value, the sine would be, I'm not being clear. At x equals 0, the sine is going to be also 0. Okay, where at x equals 0, it will not be 0. Okay, so if it is on the midline, that's equivalent to 0. So if at the y-axis it's on the midline, you know it's going to be sine. If it's not on the midline, then that's going to be our cosine. Now, just to practice, Miss often made this, so we're going to go through it quick. So we're deciding, is it sine or cosine, and which one would be easier to represent it. Okay, so as we look at this one, sine or cosine, we go to the y-axis. Our midline here is the x-axis, so that's clearly going to be cosine. This one would be flipped cosine. Okay, look at this next one. Here's our midline. At the y-axis, it's a peak, so that's going to be cosine again. Okay, our next one. On this one, the midline, once again, the x-axis, right here, it is at the midline. Okay, so this would be represented with sine. Our next one, be careful. Some of you will say, well, it's not at 0, so that's cosine. But look, it is at 2. That is going to be your midline. It goes from 2 up to 5 is 3. From 2 down to -1, that's 3. Okay, so this one is sine. All right, our next one. For this one, they only gave us one period, so maybe it's a little more challenging. But you can see your midline here is at 40. So this one is definitely cosine. All right, our next one, you can clearly tell the midline, it's not at the midline, so that one's cosine. Once again, here's our midline at -1, so that's cosine. This one, the midline is the x-axis, which is where it is, so that would be sine. And that is our last one. So just to kind of practice that. Now, as we look here on the first one, before we even solve it, you can see your midline. So if I were you, I like to draw in the midline. So let me draw in my midline for that one. Now my midline is at 0, which means there's a vertical shift, or there is not a vertical shift. So there will be no C term. And as you can see at the midline, it is a peak, so this will be cosine. Now we look, what is my amplitude? So up 1, 2, 3, or down 1, 2, 3. So we know this will be cosine with an amplitude of 3. So y equals 3 cosine. Now for our B term, we have to look and decide what is one period. So it starts at the peak, goes down, the peak ends right here at 8 pi. Now, that's not what we put there as our B term. 8 pi will equal, remember we said the period always equals 2 pi over b. Okay, we put that over 1, we cross multiply, we will get 8 pi b. That will equal 2 pi. We divide both sides by 8 pi, cancels out, divide by 8 pi. The pi's cancel, and b would then equal 1/4. Okay, so we can come up here and 1 over 4x, close your parentheses. Now, as we said, we know there is no C term because there's no vertical shift. It's centered around the x-axis. Okay, example 2. Once again, I always recommend find your midline first. So our midline here, -2. So there will be a vertical shift. It shifts it down. Now it goes through both the y-axis and the midline at the same spot. So this is sine. So y will equal, what's our amplitude? Up 1, 2, 3. So 3 again. So 3 sine. Now we need our b term. And once again, we know at the end it will have -2. As we said, it has a vertical shift of down 2. So to find our b term, we need to first find what is our period. So it starts here, goes up, down, and back up. It ends one cycle there at pi. Okay, so I take pi, or pi over 1, and set that equal to 2 pi over b. We cross multiply here. We'll get pi b will equal 2 pi. And the only way this is possible is if b has a value of 2. Okay, so then we go up here, and all we got to put is 2x. And we're done. All right. Our next one, once again, always start with that midline. So example 3, midline here is at 3. And it goes through a 0, so we know this is sine. Or it's what I meant to say is on the y-axis, it's at the midline, so this is going to be sine. Once again, you could represent this as cosine if you shifted it, but we are not going to deal with that today. So we're just saying if we aren't shifting, which one is it? Okay, so y equals, now the amplitude is 1. If you want to put 1 in front of the sign, you can. I'll choose just to put sine. And we need to find our b term, and we said it shifted up 3. Okay, so let's look. What is 1 period? Starts here, goes up, then down, finishes here at 6 pi over 5. So this one's a little quirky, 6 pi over 5, but same process. That will equal 2 pi over b. Cross multiply. We're going to get 6 pi b equals 10 pi. We divide by 6 pi, divide by 6 pi. The pi's cancel. And 10 over 6, that reduces to 5 over 3. So we get 5 over 3x. And we would be done. Okay, example 4. Once again, always find your midline. Midline here is at 1. At the y-axis, it is not on the midline. It's at a peak, so this one we know will be cosine. It's got an amplitude up 1, 2. So y equals 2 cosine. And we need to find what our b term is, but first let's think of our shift. It goes up 1, the midline's at 1, so plus 1. Now let's check what is our period. Starts here at the peak, goes down and back up to the peak at 2 pi. So if 2 pi over 1 would equal 2 pi over b, at this point you guys are probably familiar. You know b has to be 1. If you're not sure about that, cross multiply, you'll solve b is 1. So I can put 1x, or I can just put x. So that's 4 examples. Flip it to the back. We got a few more. If I were you, maybe pause it. Try these on your own. Okay. So there is going to be then a Delta Math assignment today, doing some work with this. So on number 5, once again, always find your midline. So there's my midline at -2. We know it's going to shift down 2. There's a peak there on the y-axis, so this one has to be cosine. Amplitude up 1, down 1. So we know y equals, I can put 1 cosine, or I can just put cosine. I don't know what goes in here yet, but as we said, it shifted down 2, so -2. Or if you have plus -2, that's the same thing. Okay, just a little bit extra. But I know yesterday, or in the last class with our boxes, some of you maybe were seeing that. So now let's figure out what our period is. So it starts here at the peak, down all the way to 8 pi. So if we have 8 pi over 1, and that will equal 2 pi over b, we cross multiply, we're going to get 8 pi b equals 2 pi. Once again, we had this on the front, so if you remember, that's fine. If not, just do it again. Those pi's cancel. 2 over 8 reduces to 1/4. So in here, I just put 1/4 x. All right, example 6. Our midline here will be at 3. And I know I'm moving kind of fast today, so if you need to, pause it. If you're not sure what I did, go back, repeat it. If you have any questions, definitely send me an email. So this one at y-axis, it's at the midline, so this will be sine. The amplitude is 1. It's 1 up and 1 down from the midline, so y equals sine. Now I don't know what goes in there, but I do know it's shifted up 3, so plus 3. Now, if we think about it here, we need to figure out what is our period. So we start here, it goes up, then down, it's all the way to 2 pi. So once again, if you forget, you can always set up 2 pi over 1 equals 2 pi over b. But anytime it's 2 pi, that's kind of your standard, your generic version. B will just be 1. So 1x, or I'm just going to put in x. All right, 2 more to do. Once again, no matter how they look, always find the midline. That's the best advice I can have for you. Okay, so in our case here, midline's at -1. If you're not sure how we're getting that midline, it's because it's up 1, 2, 3, 4 to the top, down 1, 2, 3, 4 to the bottom. Okay, so it's 4 from both the max and the min. Now, we know at the y-axis, it's at the midline, so this will be sine. As we said, the amplitude is 4, so y equals 4 sine. Don't know what goes in there yet. The shift is down 1, so -1. Now we look, our period started at 0, goes up, then down, then up, ends here at pi. So a period of pi. We did have this on the front. If you remember, that's fine. If not, go ahead and solve it. We cross multiply, we're going to get pi b equals 2 pi. We divide by pi, and we'll get b equals 2. So we put 2x in there, and we are done. All right, our final one. Once again, as always, find that midline. In this case, it's at 3. So up 2 and down 2, it's going to be amplitude of 2. Now, is it sine or cosine? Hopefully you can tell. On the y-axis, it's the peak. So that's got to be cosine. So y equals 2 cosine. I don't know what's in the parentheses, but I do know it's shifted up 3, so plus 3. Now, I want to also point out, before we find this last one, if this had actually been a valley, that would tell us it was flipped, and we would have -2 there. I forgot to put any of those in there with flipping it, but hopefully you know if you have a valley at the y-axis, then that's flipped, and it will be a negative in front of the amplitude. Likewise, if it's sine and it starts going down, you know it would be flipped as well. Flipped or shifted, but we're not doing shifts today. Okay, so to finish it out, what's our period? We start here, comes down, goes back up, ends at 4 pi. So one cycle is 4 pi radians, so 4 pi over 1, that equals 2 pi over b. We cross multiply, we get 4 pi b equals 2 pi, divide by 4 pi. The pi's will cancel. 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2. And we have 1 over 2x there. So we are done. If you have any questions, let me know. Test is coming up at the end of the week. Okay, so the test is Friday the 12th. So if you're not understanding things, definitely don't wait till then. Reach out. Let me know. Hope you guys have a great day. And that is all I've got for you. Goodbye.